My revenge was revealing that my stepfather killed my mother right in the middle of his wedding anniversary party, causing his perfect world to come crashing down around him. But this wasn't a crime of passion. It was a sentence, meticulously planned and calmly executed, and I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Before the diary, my world was divided into two distinct eras: the hazy, warm memories of life with my mother, and the sharp, vibrant clarity of life after Richard. My father passed away from a sudden heart attack when I was 6. I have faint, dreamlike recollections of him, the scratch of his beard against my cheek, the low rumble of his laugh. His death was a soft, gray fog that settled over our small house, a quiet sadness that my mother wore like a second skin. Then, 2 years later, Richard entered our lives. He was a supernova in our gray universe. Richard wasn't just a man. He was an event. He was the CEO of a successful architectural firm, exuding a confidence that was both calming and magnetic. He had a smile that could disarm armies and a laugh that chased the shadows from the corners of our home. He didn't try to replace my father. Instead, he carved out a new space for himself, one that was uniquely his. He was Richard, the man who taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels, who spent hours helping me build a ridiculously ambitious solar system model for my science fair, and then charmed the judges into giving me first prize. He adored my mother. The way he looked at her was the stuff of fairy tales. He would bring her flowers for no reason, whisk her away on spontaneous weekend trips, and listen with rapt attention as she talked about her passion for landscape painting. The gray fog around her began to lift, replaced by a glow I hadn't seen since I was very young. He didn't just make her happy, he made her radiant. And he was the perfect stepfather to me. He never forced a dad relationship. He was my friend, my mentor, my champion. When I was bullied in middle school, he didn't just call the principal. He enrolled me in a martial arts class to build my confidence and spent an afternoon with the bully's father, handling the situation with such grace and firmness that the boy never bothered me again. He was the one I called when I got my first A on a calculus test, and he was the one who held me when my first teenage romance ended in heartbreak. He was, in every conceivable way, perfect. Their marriage was a celebration, a testament to second chances. Our house was filled with light and laughter again. For 9 years, we were the picture-perfect family. He was the doting husband, she was the adored wife, and I was the happy, well-adjusted daughter. And then came the accident. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway for their 9th anniversary. They loved hiking, and Richard had planned a trip to a notoriously beautiful but challenging trail in the nearby mountains. I was away at a weekend debate tournament. I remember getting the call. It was a sheriff, his voice thick with practiced sympathy. There had been a fall, a slip on a patch of loose gravel near a steep cliff edge. My mother was gone. Richard's grief was a terrible, magnificent thing to behold. He was shattered. At the funeral, he was a pillar of broken strength, holding me up while he himself was visibly crumbling. He delivered a eulogy so full of love and pain that there wasn't a dry eye in the church. He spoke of her light, her laughter, her art, and the 9 perfect years they had shared. He was the tragic hero, the widower left to pick up the pieces of his perfect life. In the year that followed, his devotion to her memory was absolute. He framed her favorite landscape painting and hung it over the fireplace. He kept her studio exactly as she had left it. He talked about her often, always with a sad smile, sharing memories that made us both laugh and cry. He poured his energy into his work and into me, ensuring I had everything I needed to get through my senior year and prepare for college. He was my rock. A little over 2 years after my mother's death, he met Sarah. She was a kind, gentle woman, a pediatric nurse with warm eyes and a soft voice. Richard was transparent with me from the beginning. He sat me down, his expression grave, and told me he had met someone. He swore that no one could ever replace my mother, but that Sarah made him feel a flicker of warmth in the cold emptiness she had left behind. I was hesitant at first, but I wanted him to be happy. He deserved it. Sarah was wonderful. She never tried to be my mother. She respected her memory, often asking me about her, admiring her paintings. She loved Richard deeply, and it was clear she felt like she had won the lottery. Who wouldn't? He was handsome, successful, and carried the romantic tragedy of a widower who had loved and lost. Their wedding was a quiet, tasteful affair. His vows brought tears to my eyes as he spoke of finding love again after believing his heart was forever broken. They built a new life, a continuation of the perfect world Richard had created. He was a pillar of the community, donating generously to charities, his firm winning awards for its innovative, eco-friendly designs. He and Sarah hosted elegant dinner parties where guests would listen, captivated, as Richard spoke with intelligence and charisma on every topic imaginable. Sometimes, at these parties, someone would bring up my mother. Richard's face would adopt that familiar, tragic mask. "She was the love of my life," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion. I was a lucky man. And Sarah would place a comforting hand on his arm, her eyes full of sympathy for the great love he had lost. It was all a beautiful, intricate, monstrous lie, and I was the one who was about to burn it to the ground. The catalyst was, ironically, the party. It was to be a grand affair celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. Sarah was ecstatic, planning every detail for months. The house was being prepared for over 200 guests. Part of the preparation involved a massive clean-out. The attic, a dusty repository of forgotten things, was my designated task. I didn't mind. The attic was a time capsule. It was filled with my old-school projects, my father's dusty law books, and boxes of seasonal decorations. It was also where my mother had stored some of her old things. I spent a Saturday afternoon surrounded by ghosts, the smell of old paper and cedarwood thick in the air. I found my old teddy bear, a box of my childhood drawings, and then, tucked away inside a heavy leather-bound trunk I didn't recognize, I found it. It wasn't a fancy lock-and-key diary. It was a simple, leather-bound journal, the kind you buy at a bookstore. The leather was soft and worn at the edges. Her initials, EMR, Eleanor May Richmond, were embossed in faded gold leaf on the cover. My heart clenched. I had never seen it before. She must have hidden it. I sat down on the dusty floorboards, my back against a stack of old magazines, and opened it. The first few entries were from around the time she met Richard. They were filled with hope and excitement. Her cursive was a living thing, full of loops and flourishes that danced across the page. October 12th. Met a man named Richard today at the gallery opening. He was so compelling. He looked at my paintings as if he could see the story behind every brushstroke. We talked for 2 hours. I feel a spark I thought was long extinguished. I smiled, a lump forming in my throat. I read on, tracing the story of their courtship, their marriage, our life together. It was all there, just as I remembered it. Pages and pages of love, happiness, and gratitude for this wonderful man who had mended her broken heart and built a family with her. I felt a fresh wave of grief, a deep sadness for the perfect life that had been cut short. I was about to close the journal, feeling emotionally drained, when I noticed it was not completely full. There were entries near the end. My hand started to tremble as I flipped forward. The handwriting changed. The joyful, looping script became tight, jagged, and hurried. The date was 2 days before the hiking trip. May 14th. A strange fight with Richard tonight. It came out of nowhere. He's been under a lot of pressure at work. A big project fell through, I think. But this was different. He said some things, cruel things, about my painting being a cute hobby and how I didn't understand real-world pressure. He accused me of being naive, of living in a fantasy. It was the first time he's ever looked at me with something other than adoration. It felt like contempt. He apologized immediately, of course, held me and told me he was just stressed and didn't mean it. But the look in his eyes, I can't shake it. It was cold, like a stranger was looking at me. My blood ran cold. I had no memory of this. They had seemed so happy before they left. I kept reading, my heart hammering against my ribs. The next entry was from the morning of the hike. It was the last one she ever wrote. May 16th. On our way to the mountains. He's trying to be normal, all smiles and charm, but there's something brittle underneath. He keeps talking about our perfect life, our perfect love. It feels rehearsed, forced. Last night, I overheard him on the phone in his study. I only caught a few words. Financial ruin. She can't find out. Need to protect the image. What image? What can't I find out? I feel a knot of dread in my stomach. This trip, this beautiful place, it suddenly feels menacing. I hope I'm just being paranoid. My breath hitched. Financial ruin? Richard's firm was the epitome of success. It made no sense. I flipped the page, desperate for more. But there was only one page left with writing on it. It wasn't a dated entry. It was just a few lines, scrawled frantically, the pen having dug so deep it almost tore the paper. It looked like she had written it in a moment of pure terror, maybe hiding behind a rock, moments before the end. We argued at the summit. I confronted him. The finances. He admitted everything. The firm is a house of cards. He's millions in debt. He's been using my inheritance to plug the holes. He laughed when I said we could face it together. He said the image was all that mattered. I saw it then. The mask was gone. This wasn't the man I loved. This was a monster. We are near the edge. He's coming back. And then, at the very bottom of the page, 7 words that shattered my entire existence. It wasn't an accident. He let go. The attic suddenly felt airless. The dusty air was thick and suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I read the words again, and again, and again. He let go. A sound escaped my throat, a guttural sob that was part grief, part rage. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't loose gravel. He had held her life in his hands, dangling over the edge of a cliff, and he had made a choice. He had opened his fingers and let her fall. To protect his image, to hide his financial ruin, to silence the one person who knew the truth. The perfect stepfather, the grieving widower, the pillar of the community. It was all a performance. The 9 years of happiness, the laughter, the love, was any of it real, or was it all just part of building the perfect facade? I vomited in a dusty corner. The physical sickness was violent, a purge of the poison that had just flooded my system. For an hour, I just sat there, shaking, the diary clutched to my chest. The grief was a tidal wave, but this time it was different. It wasn't the soft, sad grief of loss. It was a hot, searing grief, intertwined with a rage so profound it felt like it was rewriting my DNA. The world I knew had been a lie. The man I had loved and trusted as a father was a murderer. My mother hadn't died in a tragic accident, she had been executed. And in that dusty, suffocating attic, the daughter he had raised died too. In her place, something else was born, something cold, patient, and utterly ruthless. He had taken everything from me. My mother, my childhood, my sense of safety, my very reality. I could go to the police, but what was my evidence? A diary entry? His lawyers would tear it apart. They'd paint my mother as unstable, hysterical. They'd paint me as a grieving, confused daughter. He would charm the detectives, the DA, the jury. He was Richard, after all. Perfect Richard. His reputation was his shield, a fortress he had spent over a decade building. No, a quiet arrest and a messy trial wouldn't be justice. Justice was not about putting him in a cell. Justice was about destroying the one thing he truly cared about, his perfect world, the image he had killed to protect. I would not just expose him, I would annihilate him. I would do it publicly, in a way that left no room for doubt, no escape. His anniversary party, the celebration of his new life, built on the ashes of his old one. It was the perfect stage. And I would be the lead actress in the final devastating act. The next 3 months were a masterclass in deception, a skill I must have inherited from him. The rage did not cool, it solidified. It became a block of ice in my chest, a source of chilling clarity. I moved through the world like a ghost, my face a mask of placid normality. I helped Sarah with the party preparations, offering opinions on catering and floral arrangements. "Oh, that's a beautiful choice, Sarah," I'd say, my voice light and cheerful, while inside I was calculating the best position for a hidden camera. I played the role of the devoted daughter flawlessly. I had dinner with them twice a week. I listened to Richard talk about his latest architectural triumph, a new, quote, green library for the city. I would nod and smile. "That's amazing, Richard. Mom would have been so proud." Each word was a drop of acid on my tongue, but my smile never wavered. He saw what he wanted to see, the adoring daughter, a testament to his wonderful parenting. He was so confident in his deception that he never once suspected mine. My nights were spent planning. My revenge would be a symphony of destruction, and I was its composer. First, the diary. It was the heart of my case. I couldn't risk it being dismissed as a forgery. I took it to a forensic document examiner I found online, a retired FBI agent who now worked as a private consultant. I paid him cash and used a fake name, telling him it was for an inheritance dispute. He confirmed the age of the paper, the ink, and that the handwriting was consistent throughout, merely changing under duress at the end. His signed, notarized report was my first weapon. Second, corroboration. I needed to poke holes in Richard's story of the accident. I took a weekend trip to the mountains myself, to the very trail where my mother died. I hired an experienced local guide. I told him my mother had died there, and I wanted to see the spot to find some closure. He showed me the location Richard had described to the police. "It's a tricky spot for sure," the guide said, looking at the cliff edge. "But one thing's always bothered me about the official report. Your stepfather said he was about 10 feet ahead of her when he heard her scream and turned to see her fall." "Yes, that's what he said," I replied, my voice steady. "Well," the guide continued, scratching his beard, "from that position, with the bend in the trail here, his line of sight would have been partially obscured by this rock formation. He might have seen her fall, but he wouldn't have had a clear view of her footing, of the slip itself. And the patch of gravel he mentioned, this area is mostly solid rock. It's not known for loose scree right here. It was a small inconsistency, but it was a crack in the facade. A lie he told to make the story cleaner. Third, the motive. Financial ruin. I hired a forensic accountant. Again, using a burner email and paying through a trust. I told her I was a potential investor wanting to do deep due diligence on Richard's firm. It took her 6 weeks, but what she unearthed was staggering. Richard wasn't just in debt, he was an illusionist. He had been shuffling money between shell corporations, falsifying invoices, and cooking the books for years. The company was a glittering shell, empty on the inside. My mother's considerable inheritance, which she had naively given him control over, had been vaporized. He was on the verge of total collapse right around the time of her death. After her death, a massive life insurance policy, one she didn't know he had taken out, was paid out. It saved him. It was the foundation upon which he rebuilt his perfect life with Sarah. The accountant's report was my second weapon. Finally, the delivery mechanism. This couldn't be a simple speech. It had to be a multimedia assault, leaving no room for denial. I scanned the key pages of the diary, the damning final entries. I created a simple but devastating PowerPoint presentation. Slide 1. A beautiful photo of Richard and my mother smiling on their wedding day. Slide 2. The diary entry about their first meeting. Slide 3. Another happy photo. Slide 4. A joyful entry about our family life. I would build the fairy tale first, reminding everyone of the story they all believed. Then, the turn. Slide 5. The scanned entry about the cruel fight. Slide 6. The entry from the morning of the hike, with the words, financial ruin, and protect the image, highlighted in red. Slide 7. The final, terrible page. The words, he let go, would fill the entire screen. The final slides would be screenshots from the forensic accountant's report, showing the debt, the fraud, the life insurance payout. I bought a small, powerful, pocket-sized projector and a Bluetooth speaker. The caterers would be setting up a large projection screen for a celebratory slideshow of Richard and Sarah's 10 years together that Sarah had lovingly prepared. I would hijack their system. The day of the party arrived. It was a perfect, warm, summer evening. The garden was lit with hundreds of fairy lights, and a string quartet played softly near the rose bushes. 200 of the city's most influential people mingled on the lawn, sipping champagne and congratulating the happy couple. Richard was in his element, a king in his court. He wore a tailored navy suit, his silvering hair catching the light. He looked distinguished, powerful, and deeply in love as he stood with his arm around Sarah. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, a dress for mourning. When I greeted them, Richard pulled me into a hug. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." I felt his arms around me, the arms of my mother's killer, and I smiled my perfectly practiced smile. "Thank you, Richard. I'm so happy for you both." The ice in my chest was so cold, so solid, it felt like it could shatter. I mingled. I made small talk. I laughed at jokes. I was a phantom, moving through the crowd, my heart beating a slow, steady, funereal rhythm. I found the AV technician, a young kid probably working his first big gig. I feigned a teary-eyed sentimentality. "Hi," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "This is going to sound silly, but I have a little surprise tribute I made for them. It's just a few photos of my mom. I wanted to add it to the end of Sarah's slideshow. It would mean so much to Richard." The kid's face softened with sympathy. Everyone knew the story of the tragic first wife. "Of course," he said. "Do you have it on a flash drive?" I did. The drive contained only one file. It wasn't my slideshow. It was a simple looping video of a black screen. I gave it to him and he promised to add it to the queue. My own projector and speaker were in my clutch purse. The evening wore on. Speeches were made. Toasts were raised. Then, Richard took the microphone for the main event. Sarah's slideshow began to play on the big screen behind him. Photos of their travels, their accomplishments, their love. It was sickeningly sweet. At the end of the slideshow, Richard raised his glass. His face was a mask of handsome sincerity. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice resonating with warmth. 10 years with this incredible woman," he said, beaming at Sarah, "has been the greatest gift. But I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to also honor the memory of the woman who first taught me how to love, my late wife, Eleanor." The crowd murmured in gentle appreciation. This was it, the last straw, the ultimate hypocrisy. "I know she's looking down on us tonight," he continued, his voice catching with practiced emotion, "and I want to toast to her loving memory, to Eleanor." As he raised his glass, I moved. I didn't run. I walked, my steps measured and deliberate, directly toward the stage. A hush fell over the crowd as they saw me approaching. Richard looked confused for a second, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes at being interrupted. "Honey, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice still amplified by the microphone. I stepped up beside him, taking the microphone from his unresisting hand. I turned to the crowd, my face calm, my expression unreadable. "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified across the silent garden. "That was a beautiful sentiment, my mother. Eleanor, she was a remarkable woman. She was a believer in fairy tales. She believed she had found one with you." I looked directly at him. His smile was starting to look strained. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah watching me, a look of loving encouragement on her face. It almost made me feel pity for her. "She chronicled that fairy tale," I continued, holding up the worn leather diary for all to see. "She kept a journal. And I'd like to share a little of it with you all tonight, in her memory." Richard's face went rigid. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He knew what that book was. He tried to reach for the microphone, but I stepped back. "She wrote about the day she met you, Richard," I said, my voice still eerily calm. "She wrote about how you made her feel alive again." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "She also wrote about the days leading up to her death." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Richard's face was turning pale. "She wrote about a fight you had, about you calling her life's passion a, quote, cute hobby, about a look of contempt in your eyes she'd never seen before." "That's enough," Richard hissed, his voice low and venomous, no longer the charming host. "No," I said, turning to face him fully. "It's not. She wrote about overhearing you on the phone talking about financial ruin and the need to protect the image. And then she wrote her last entry, on the mountain." I reached into my purse, my fingers closing around the small projector. I aimed it at the now black screen behind him. I clicked it on. The first image to flash onto the screen, 10 feet high, was a scanned page of her frantic, terrified handwriting. I brought the microphone to my lips, my voice now ringing with the cold, hard authority of a judge delivering a verdict. She wrote, "I confronted him. The firm is a house of cards. He's been using my inheritance to plug the holes. I saw it then. The mask was gone. This wasn't the man I loved. This was a monster." The crowd erupted in murmurs. People were standing up, their faces a mixture of confusion and horror. Richard was frozen, staring at the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. "But this," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper that was still carried to every corner of the garden. "This is the most important part." I clicked the projector again. The screen changed. Now there were only 7 words on it, magnified for all to see, in my mother's own hand. It wasn't an accident. He let go. A woman in the front row screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the night. Richard lunged at me, his face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "You little bitch! You're lying!" he roared, his voice stripped of all its charm, raw and ugly. But I was prepared. I pressed the button on my small Bluetooth speaker. My own voice, pre-recorded, filled the air, clear and cold, reading from the forensic accountant's report. A debt of over $4.7 million, fraudulent invoices totaling a life insurance policy for $5 million, taken out 3 weeks before her death, with Richard Richmond as the sole beneficiary. Every new piece of information was a hammer blow, shattering the pedestal he stood on. His business partners stared at him, their faces ashen. His friends recoiled as if he were diseased. He stopped, trapped in the spotlight, exposed. He looked wildly around the garden, at the faces of the people who had once adored him, now looking at him with dawning horror and disgust. His eyes met Sarah's. She was staring at him, her hand over her mouth, her face a canvas of utter devastation and disbelief. The love in her eyes had curdled into terror. In that moment, he didn't just lose his reputation, he lost his future. And as his new wife stared at him in horror, and the guests began to scream, to shout, to pull out their phones and call the police, the last thing I saw was the mask of the perfect stepfather melt away, replaced by the face of a cornered killer. I didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. My work was done. I calmly walked off the stage, through the stunned, parting crowd, and out of the garden. I didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the symphony of his destruction. The shouting, the crying, the first distant wail of sirens. I got in my car and drove. I drove to the cemetery. The gates were locked, but I knew a spot where the fence was low. I climbed over and walked through the silent gravestones until I reached hers. The air was cool and clean. I sat on the grass in front of the simple marble headstone that read, Eleanor May Richmond, beloved wife and mother. I placed the diary on the grass beside me. "I know now, Mom," I whispered to the silent stone. "I know what he did, and now so does everyone else. The image is broken. The lie is over. He has nothing left. A profound, quiet calm settled over me. It wasn't the giddy thrill of victory. It wasn't the hot burn of revenge. It was something deeper. It was release. The weight I had been carrying for 3 months, no, for 11 years, was finally gone. The ice in my chest had melted, and for the first time since I'd opened that diary, tears streamed down my face. They weren't tears of rage or sorrow. They were tears of peace. My mother was not a tragic footnote in Richard's perfect story. I had given her back the truth, and in doing so I had finally, truly, set us both free.